Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very brief response discussion related to the OYO Empire. This is in response to an Indigenous American discussion about the historical relationship between the Americas and Africa. And by historical relationship, we are talking about relationships between the people historically. And so, what we're going to be doing is doing a deconstruction of the word OYO because this came up in the conversation related to this historical relationship. And so there are some questions about the history of the Oyo Empire. We are just going to be addressing the meaning of the name Oyo in a way that we did with the name Shem. And so we're going to do a similar deconstruction. For your clarity and convenience, the link to the original discussion on the Oyo Empire is going to be below. It will also have a timestamp because it's a very small percentage of that actual discussion. So if you want to go directly to that point, you can. So the Oyo Empire was a Yoruba state north of Lagos. It is in what is considered present day southwestern Nigeria. And so you might have recalled that we discussed the Oyo Empire with respect to the history of the transatlantic slave trade. This is just a partial deconstruction of Oyo because the deconstruction of Oyo starts to go off in multiple directions. And so we are going to focus on this particular direction and then let you know at the end of this where we're going to go with the next segment of this particular discussion. And so Oyo etymology, looking at this particular reference, it indicates that it translates essentially to I. And we've looked at this whole dynamic of I before with respect to a number of other topics, and you're going to see how these are all connected. And here you can see this pathway with respect to this Oyo and how it makes its way down into the Latin, which is oculum. You can also see continuing on, it goes to oculus and then olo, which can also be pronounced yo, so oyo, and then goes down to oyo. And so ultimately what we have here is this idea of to see or an eye. It's also important to point out that this is similar to the word Ethiopia. And Ethiopia also refers to this idea of face or eye. And here you can see the specifics. You see Proto-Indo-European, and it is I to see, I to see. Going down, you see the Proto-Italic, which is oculos, which is I. And here you see the Latin again. So you see that oculum and then oculus, think oculus. And you can see here over to the right-hand side that it is I again. And it shouldn't be surprising based upon the history of the Oyo, based upon the history of that west coast of Africa, that it is going down into the Old Portuguese and it is rendering I. And then you can see right below that is the Oyo. You might recall from earlier discussions that this idea of to see or I is related to the construct of dragon. And so as you recall, dragon is a mythical monster. However, there's a little bit more that goes along with dragon than meets the eye. And so you can see the rest of the usage for dragon down below. This is looking at Strong's Concordance, and so there are specific references to the dragon, particularly in the New Testament. And so this is in the Greek, and it is indicated as drakon. You might recall that we addressed the topic of the dragon or the dracon previously. We've addressed it a couple of times, but specifically we talked about the dragon related to the Harry Potter series. And so the dragon is related to this idea of the seeing one, those mythical huge serpents, in other words, the Leviathan. The dragon is also referenced in the book of Revelation 12:7 and 9. And so the dragon, the Leviathan, is also related to political powers and operating from behind the scenes. And here you can see again that this is related to this idea of to look. It's related to a mythical monster. And here you can see this entity known as a dragon is also identified as a serpent. Again, in other words, Leviathan. With me, Hail Mary, run quick. This dragon entity is first noted in the book of Revelation, and that's primarily where you see this particular all-seeing sort of dragon. And you see the first reference there at 12:3, referring to a great red dragon. With me, Hail Mary, run quick. To see or seeing one or dragon is also related in the Hebrew to the word tan, which is related to the animal known as a jackal. This is interesting, of course, because we've discussed this whole dynamic of the jackal and the word akata before. With me, Hail Mary, run quick. In contrast to this whole idea of the seeing one and the dragon and the serpent and the jackal, there is a transliteration of OYO that equates to constructs such as happy or joy or contentment. One thing that stood out, we're not going to do the deconstruction here on this, but one thing that stood out in that transliteration was that OYO, coming out of Strong's, was presenting something that was in contrast to this whole idea of happy, joy, contentment. It was more related to the idea of woe. Also, with respect to the Arabic, there was a transliteration that was Mara. This is significant because, of course, we have groups of people around the world understood as Mara. We've already deconstructed Mara in a number of ways. We've deconstructed Moor, Mar, Moor, Muir. And so this particular one is important because it is coming out of the Arabic, and there is a historical relationship between the Arabs and the entities known as the OYO. And so, of course, this is another way of saying more. And so in this way, the OYO Empire is related to what would be considered the Moor Empire.